Good morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from our new studio. We're still working on some things, but we are going to do today's show live Q&A with Chris Kessel here from the new office, studio, etc. And excited to do today's show here and to have our friend of the show, Chris Kessel, joining us for this live Q&A. And right before I bring Chris on, I just want to throw up this graphic for you. If you want to text questions into the show, you can do so at 1-844-789-8844. We've already had some questions coming in, texted in to that number. You can email questions to team@wrk.mn, or you can send Twitter DM questions to @Daniel Workman. We'll throw this graphic up periodically throughout the show. We've already had quite a few questions come in, and we're going to get started with some of those questions, and at the same time bring Chris on to the show as we're going to kind of talk through a bunch of these questions. Hot topic this week has been U.S. soccer, the Development Academy, etc. Just wanted to get some of your thoughts before we jump into the questions, Chris, in terms of what you're hearing. It is. The whole thing from a timeline perspective, and something I want to get into in just a little bit was curious. There are reports out that just don't support the information U.S. Soccer put out a few days ago when they made the announcement, and then yesterday the letter from CEO Will Wilson, kind of doesn't support some of that either. So we'll see. But like I said, I want to get into that in just a little bit. But I wanted to bring in our first question. The question is, given the latest news, do you think U.S. Soccer will make the change from birth year back to using August 1st to July 31st as the age group guidelines? It was rumored a few months ago. What are your thoughts there?
Think that the people that were most affected by it, who were actually concerned about making sure that those kids affected have figured out solutions. They just play those kids up in age group so they can play with their friends from school, where regardless of whether they're ready or not, or however they do it. They just play by grade level as an entire organization. There's just all kinds of solutions out there. I think that this would, and this is what I think the thinking is at this point, that it would just cause the same exact set of problems that happened a few years ago, and there's no reason to go back. And I think that that's, from talking to some people, I think that that's the thinking that will prevail. Hopefully that will prevail, because another massive shift like that, at the youngest age groups will be ridiculous, just like the first switch was ridiculous. And I think that's where we'll end up at.
So you think we stay the same, that we they won't make the shift from birth year back to August, this basically the academic school year calendar?
Right. Yeah, I think we'll stay the same.
So it's not really a follow-up question, but just some of their thoughts here was their opinion was that this would allow kids to play with their classmates, help retain kids in the game, increasing the bottom of the pyramid. I think we focus too much on elite and not enough on building grassroots and promoting unstructured neighborhood play. I may sound a bit harsh here, but I think the parents make a way bigger deal out of this than the kids do. And I don't understand why it's a big deal in the first place. I mean, maybe it's just because it's never been important to me, like the whole, because there's like my kids, one was affected by the birth year. The other one wasn't, but the one that was affected wasn't even old enough when the effect went into change. So it never really kind of did anything for me. And I've always been one, in terms of grouping kids, have never been a strict believer in, strict placement based on, your birth year, because some kids are maybe really, really good and need to play up an age group anyway. So this idea of purity at having, this one set of kids at 12, August 1st to July 31st versus January 1st to December 31st. I don't know. I just never thought it was a big deal. I know at the time it was, because there was so much change and people were whatever, but like, I don't ever, when I'm out around the fields, I don't ever hear anyone talking about this anymore. So to go back, I'm kind of with you. I just don't know that they want to, I don't know that they want to deal with the headaches of going back. I understand, and I'm empathetic towards those who might feel differently, but I don't know. I don't see it as as that big a deal, at least for me. Okay, so go ahead while I'm pulling up the next question.
Oh, no, I'm 100% agreement with you. And basically, I think that the people out there that really wanted their kids to play with a certain kid, if they were in an organization, if they're in organizations that are kid centric, they let them play with them. I mean, it's that's the solution. Every
Right.
kid doesn't want to necessarily have a group of kids that they want to play with, but if I have a kid, a parent who shows up and said, man, little Johnny wants to play with, little James, and but they're, a year apart, and that'd make them a U9 instead of U8. Oh, well, but they go to school. All right, well, we'll just put them on a team. I mean, problem solved. Like, this isn't a big deal. Like, as long as organizations are kid centric, And that's, I think,
right
now that's where maybe a lot of the people that have problems are, they're in organizations that are not kid centric. They're rule centric or winning centric or, whatever. But if you are not worried about making sure that you put the absolute best team possible on the field, at U6, then you'll let a kid play in an age group with their friends.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that there are decisions at the local level that you can make that, can address this issue without massive upheaval across the country.
Nobody is stopping you from running your community club with it being by grade level. Like there is no person, rule, organization that's stopping you from going, all the fourth graders play for that team. If you have a team, an 09 team, and you have a bunch of, third and fourth graders or whatever that would be, and you have to play them in the U12 league, because some of them happen to be 08s because they're, fourth graders instead of the 09 league. Okay, you play in the 08 league, but they're all fourth graders. You made that decision. Nobody's stopping you. Like, just go and do it.
Right.
If you think that your organization absolutely has that, just go do it. Nobody's stopping you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think sometimes in situations like this, now there's a lot of topics we're going to get to today that, do need the federation to help, or to lead, etc. In this area, I think there are answers locally, as you pointed out so well there. If you feel like fourth graders need to play together, then stack the team with fourth graders and play them in whatever age bracket they have to play in. So if the oldest kids are, 2009s and the younger kids are 2010s, then you know what? That's what you do. You go play them at the 2009 age bracket, and you deal with it. At that point, you're not talking about an age gap disparity that's going to be that large. If you've got some 2010s playing with the 2009s, maybe a 6 month, no more than 12 month age gap. And look, I've seen plenty of 2010s who can ball their way through against 2009s without any issues. So this idea of the players not being able to handle it, I think, obviously case by case, some kids may not be able to, and that's a decision you'd have to make. But I do think there are things you can do on your own to solve this. And I think as much as possible, to me, just from a general perspective, as much as you can solve on your own, I think U.S. Soccer is showing you're better off taking that on yourself, rather than trying to wait on them to fix it for you, because they're probably not going to. So, as much as you can control, like you pointed out, find ways to work within the rules, work around the rules. If you have an in-house league and you're not going to play anybody else and everything's self-contained, then, and you want to do it grade level, then that should never even be an issue for you.
Yeah.
So next question, with the pay-to-play issue in youth soccer, how do you feel if a club views some players around the age of 14 to 17 capable of playing at a higher level, in terms of putting them into adult teams that play in a competitive league, like an elite amateur one, and they use the example of USASA. So basically their question is, how do you feel about clubs moving, the better players that are 14 to 17 into playing in adult competitions is their basic answer. I'll let you go. I have an answer that I'll give after yours, but curious what your thoughts are with that.
It's absolutely ridiculous if you're not doing it. How about we start there? if you're playing, that's one of the things that I find so awesome about scholastic soccer. We were just talking about kids maybe playing up 6 months, against kids 6 months, 12 older than them. When you're in sixth grade, you're playing against eighth graders. And when you're in ninth grade, you're playing against 17, 18-year-old, seniors. When you're 16, 17 years old, you should absolutely be playing in the adult league, in addition to your age group. There's no reason why the best players aren't playing in the adult league. And this isn't even necessarily having to play against, in the NPSL. Your U17 team should be playing in the adult league, against grown men. You have to go and push yourself against people that are just physically bigger, stronger, faster than you. You might not be faster. 17-year-olds really fast, but that are just technically experienced and more savvy, because this is the thing that I just can't wrap my head around, this thing that people think that they don't think, they act like as soon as you're done being a college player that you're no longer any good. Your local men's league is full of guys that are 25 to 29 and 30, 31, 32 that are former college players. It's full of it. There's 2 or 3 generations of local guys that played college soccer playing in your local men's league that are still in tip-top shape and the prime of their athletic career. Just go and put your U17s in the men's league and watch them get washed sometimes. They might be out there destroying the other U17s, but they're out there playing against grown men that know how to play and have been playing together for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. They need that experience. And, that's what I think is a missing key component of the development process. We don't have the ability for most players to break through to the first team. Most youth players in the United States don't play for a team, for a club that has a first team. You have to give them that experience. Everywhere else in the world, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are breaking through into the first team, where they're playing U23, soccer. And that just isn't something that can happen here. So we have to make sure that these kids have that same kind of developmental process, piece of their process that's missing. And you have to create that for them. And playing in adult leagues, playing in the NPSL or playing in, UPSL or whatever, it is the best situation. I mean, if you don't have that, obviously, then you play in your local adult league. You get them to play in there.
So I 100,000 million% agree with your view there. I've seen this with my oldest son since the age of 10. He has been playing. Right now, they're not playing because of the pandemic. But when it's not a crisis, he plays pretty much every Saturday when he's in town. With this group of adult Latinos and others from around the community since the age of 10. And these are grown men. So some of them are, 18. Some of them are in their 20s. Some of them are 30s, 40s. I mean, we got a couple guys that are in their 50s that come out and play. He's been playing with them for, I think this summer will be 5 years now. And he also has played with older groups when he's been in Europe. He's done the same thing, playing up inside of the club that he plays at, and then he's also played with an adult Latino team in a local league as well. And so I'm just a big believer in that experience. There is nothing that will help progress a player's development than playing with older players. You pick up things from them. I don't understand why so many in American youth soccer, especially, want to protect the kids and shelter them from this type of exposure or competition. Like, oh, they're so young, or oh, we've got to be careful with them. Like, there's nothing better than modeling, mentorship, transference. If you talk to players who come from other cultures, other backgrounds, about their experience growing up playing the game, I guarantee you 100 times out of 100 that you have those conversations with them, they played with kids that were younger than them, the same age as them, and older than them. They played with adults. They played with anybody that would play. It was never siloed off, and your entire soccer experience is to play with people that were born the same birth year or in your grade. I guess this, to the first question, this is why I don't even care, honestly, about the whole birth year conversation, because I don't even think that the idea of putting kids based on birth year is that big a deal, because I think we should be trying to find ways for kids to have those experiences where they go up against others who are bigger, faster, stronger. Maybe they're more cunning and savvy, have more experience. Maybe they're not as quick as you anymore, but man, they know what to do with the ball, and you start to see a different way the game can be played. And so I just think there are so many positives, so many benefits. Yes, I get the whole idea of you don't want to put a child in an environment where they're going to get hurt. Okay, I understand that. But I'm not talking about extremes of throwing an 8-year-old out in an adult Latino game and saying, hey, man, go have at it. But this idea of, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old players playing in environments with adults, shouldn't be, groundbreaking. It should be the norm. Like if you have a team in an academy that you train and you go to play in tournaments or state cup or whatever, and you don't have a local league to play in, then why aren't you putting your U16s, your U17s, your U18s in these adult leagues and playing? Like, that to me would be great for them. I don't see any reason not to.
Yep.
So,
we're on the same page.
Before we go on, I want to bring up the graphic again. Our Friday live Q&A today with Chris Kessel. You can text questions to 1-844-789-8844. You can email questions to team@wrk.mn. You can also send Twitter DM questions to @Daniel Workman. DMs are open, so don't worry about that. If that's where you want to send them, we will get them. So you can text to 1-844-789-8844. You can email to team@wrk.mn, or you can send Twitter DM questions to @Daniel Workman as well. And we'll bring up our next question, which is this: is there any government oversight of the United States Federation? It seems like there should be. It shouldn't just be another wing of the Soccer United marketing MLS monopoly. And if not, what would it take to bring more accountability oversight to the U.S. Soccer Federation? So the first part of that question is, is there any government oversight of the U.S. Soccer Federation? Chris, what are your thoughts on there being or not being, is there any oversight for the Federation?
There is from the USOPC, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee has oversight of U.S. soccer. Now, how much oversight are they actually providing is, something that's up for debate right now. But that is who is theoretically providing the oversight for the Federation from the U.S. government. And I personally think that the U.S. Soccer Federation is not living up to all of the things that they're supposed to be living up to from USOPC, regulatory, vision of what's going on. And I know that Hope Solo won her lawsuit, concerning that very thing. And, when she took the Federation to court about, certain things that they were supposed to be doing and that they weren't doing, it's the Ted Stevens Act is, what gives, what the actual law is that governs it. You can download it. It's really not a large document. You can download it and read it. And, it's all there. I'm not a lawyer. I've talked to a lawyer about it who went through and read it and kind of analyzed the whole situation. And they felt like the same way I did about some of the items that I didn't think that they were living up to, but they weren't exactly sure who had standing to bring a lawsuit about those items. And if it would take an actual, former Olympic team player, or current Olympic team player, or just it's a confusing situation about who could actually bring a lawsuit. But I think that it would take contacting your, representative in Congress, to take a look at it. If you want to help bring more pressure upon the Federation to do what they're supposed to do, Congress would definitely have the ability to to make change, to make them change. So, if you've got the ability to talk to a representative, talk to them, bring this to, their attention, obviously know what you're talking about and show them exactly how they aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and help bring pressure to bear.
So if you go through U.S. Soccer's bylaws, basically to, build off of what you were saying, they lay out, and you can find their bylaws. And if you can't find them, just, send me a DM. I'll send you a copy. It's not a problem. They talk about in bylaw 103, as well as in bylaw 105, that their status as a national governing body obviously comes from FIFA, as you mentioned. They also have membership through CONCACAF, which is the confederation. So that FIFA basically kind of splits the world into, I think it's 6 groups, if I remember correctly, with UEFA, CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, etc. And then under CONCACAF, which is North American, Central American, and Caribbean countries, the United States Soccer Federation is, a part of CONCACAF and part of FIFA. They also get their, status within the U.S. As recognized by the Sports Act, which is, as you mentioned, the Ted Stevens Act, and that is through the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And in bylaw 105, they actually talk about that the federation shall be autonomous in its governing of the sport of soccer in the U.S. and may not delegate its governance responsibilities. There are so many things in their bylaws where I think you could point out that they don't don't actually follow their own rules. And Section 3 of that bylaw 105, the federation shall provide equal opportunity to athletes, coaches, trainers, managers, officials, and administrators to participate in amateur soccer competitions. Please tell me how the Development Academy that has been recently terminated, or any of the other amateur programs offered by U.S. Youth Soccer, U.S. Club Soccer, that may have non-sporting merit entry into those competitions as something that's allowable. Again, there's so many things we could go through on that. I think the bottom line is, to sum up the governance and oversight, in the second part of this question, what would it take to bring more accountability and oversight to the U.S. Soccer Federation, is simply this, that there's two main things. Two main things I think need to happen, but there are three ways. One is already happening, so that's why I'm not going to say needs to happen, because it's already underway. So that one that's already underway is the legal challenges. So you've seen that with Hope Solo going to the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. She's also brought her own suit before the U.S. women's national team even started theirs, about the equal pay, equal treatment situation. You have the U.S. women's national team lawsuit, the NASL lawsuit, the relevant sports lawsuits. You have all these legal challenges to the status quo way that U.S. soccer has been doing business. So that's one area that's already happening. So we don't have to say, well, that needs to happen, because it's already underway. The two things that need to happen, one area is internal. And so oversight internally needs to come from the membership. So that is policy proposals, bylaw proposals. We saw this at the AGM. There were quite a few policy proposals. West Virginia was part of that brigade with the Equal Voting Act for professional leagues, based on sanctioning and not having gender discrimination. And there were others. Illinois adults were another one that put forth some bylaw and policy proposals. That stuff needs to continue to be a check and balance from within, oversight and accountability from within the federation, from its members, and going public with things that happen that in the past has been talked about, whispered about quietly. I think now's the time to begin to hold them accountable. The membership go public and hold them accountable publicly. When something happens that doesn't look right or isn't, following the bylaws or policies, go public with those things. Go to the media, go public, be brave, and be willing to speak up and say what needs to be said. Is one internal government or oversight type of deal, and from a governance standpoint, that is part of being a federation member. You have that ability to do it. From outside external government oversight is, as you mentioned, contacting your congressperson, your senator, and others who have the ability to come over the top of U.S. soccer through the Ted Stevens Act and maybe even other laws to basically rein them in or force them to adopt some things that they can't set on their own. Like, here's an example, and what some within U.S. soccer would say is an extreme example, but I'll just use it hypothetically. If the Ted Stevens Act was changed to say that every sports organization in this country had to have open admission to every sports league that they govern based on on-field results, i.e. promotion, relegation, sporting merit, U.S. Soccer would have no option except to adopt that policy, because that would be government oversight that had come in from over the top of them saying no more discrimination, no more picking who gets to play in your top leagues. This is how you have to do it. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen or is likely, but that is something that could happen from the outside. They could also, going back to the earlier birth year question, they could go into the Ted Stevens Act and say that all Olympic programming has to operate on an August 1st to July 31st calendar, and all of your player registrations and team groupings have to follow the kind of basic academic calendar. At that point, again, U.S. Soccer would have no choice but to go back to the scholastic calendar of age cutoff, because the Ted Stevens Act does provide that oversight over them through the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, that they would be forced into those changes. So there are things that could be done. Is there somebody sitting with a gavel just watching everything U.S. Soccer does and is just, ruling on every ruling they give? No, that's not happening. And I don't know that would ever happen. That would have to be, I think, a pretty extreme augmentation of the Ted Stevens Act for that kind of body to be a proactive accountability oversight body to U.S. Soccer. But as we've seen in the past, members of the federation have been called to Congress to testify, and I think those kind of things could continue. I think the alterations to the Ted Stevens Act are a very real opportunity to see some oversight and accountability and things change going forward. So I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, but I think those are some three main kind of, if I was to reduce those down, you have legal, you have membership, internal, and then you have the Ted Stevens Act and Congress that all in their own ways can provide accountability and oversight. Some cost way more than others, as we know with the legal challenges, and some don't cost as much, but are very difficult as well, as we've seen from some of the policy initiatives undertaken in the past. So, Chris, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
The only thing I want to say is to your second point, even if you're just involved at the lowest level, at your local club, you can still, via your state organization or U.S. Club Soccer or whoever you're registered through, help bring to bear pressure on the federation by pressuring your state organization to become more involved in that internal oversight process, in that being a change agent process. And if you don't get the kind of response that you think should happen, then you need to become a leader within your organization so that you can then go for, put forth that pressure. Don't expect somebody else to do this for you. You're going to have to be one of the people that makes this happen. Go and run for leadership positions, no matter what level they are, so that you can participate in this, reform process.
I agree. As we continue on, before we go into the next question, I want to go in and bring back up that you can send your questions. You can text them into 1-844-789-8844. You can email questions to team@wrk.mn, and you can send any Twitter DM questions to @Daniel Workman. Questions are continuing to come in, and we are going to continue soldiering on through these questions, and we appreciate the feedback as well as the topics and questions that are coming in. So again, those are your options there on the screen to text, email, or send Twitter DM questions, and we will try to get to as many of these as possible today as we are going through the show. And on to our next question. which is the question is wondering if the MLS announcement surprised U.S. Soccer on the MLS DA announcement. Is this something that Major League Soccer is kind of winging, and there's no real plan, or do you think that MLS, had a plan and this is part of a bigger plot and strategy? Kind of where do you fall on that, Chris?
So from talking to some people, and I think it's pretty common knowledge that the MLS wanted out of the DA or wanted massive structural changes to how the DA ran. We saw that with the fact that they tiered the system, with, all the MLS academies in one tier with just a smattering of non-MLS DAs and then a second tier. So I think it was pretty apparent and obvious that they wanted out of the game. They wanted out of the DA. They wanted their own thing. They wanted to be in control of it and everything. So I know that was happening. But now, was there some collusionary aspect of the timing of the closing of the DA? I don't know. But I have a feeling that the pandemic gave cover to making a hard decision. Instead of the Federation doesn't like making hard decisions. They do not show leadership in many things. And I think that this hard decision, which I think was the correct decision, the DA was not working. It was expensive. We weren't getting $8 to $10 million a year of value out of this spend. And I think that this gave them cover to make this hard decision. And then MLS used that as, this is exactly what we wanted anyways. So they then made their announcement. I'm sure that they had forewarning of it. I don't know how long, but I do actually believe that this was, from talking to some people, the board of directors did not know this decision was coming down even 2 days beforehand. So I do believe that Will Wilson came in and made this decision. I don't know if Cindy Parlow Combs supported it, the president of the Federation, but I do believe that he made this decision, and now MLS has jumped on it like, okay, here's what we want to do. And now they're growing that idea from here. I do not know if this hard decision, and in my opinion, correct decision, to change, to cancel the DA was, worked out collaboratively with MLS. Now, the problem that I do have with how this went down is that U.S. Soccer didn't have the second step, which is what comes afterwards. They didn't have that planned and laid out, and how are we going to, move everything forward? Now, that's where my problem lies in this whole process. But I actually am not buying into the conspiracy theory that this was something that was planned, a long time ago by a bunch of actors within the Federation. This is more of there's new leadership, and they used the pandemic to make a hard decision that they otherwise probably wouldn't have made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I would say my thoughts on this have been a little fluid the more I've talked to people, in terms of, MLS's role in all this. I think there's a couple things going on here. The first is, Taylor Twellman pointed out that the termination of the DA He tweeted this out the other day when all this became official, that he'd been hearing about this for 6 months, that this was not a big secret, that this was something that U.S. Soccer was considering. Many say we're wanting to do, etc. So from that standpoint, I think that anyone who said it's COVID-19 is the cause of the termination in U.S. Soccer's own statement, to me, is very disingenuous on that part. It may have given them the cover to pull the trigger now, but this has been something that's been talked about for a while. You pointed out that there were board members and others that didn't know. And many within U.S. Soccer at the DA levels that didn't know, were not included in the decision-making process. And that is unfortunately part of the culture that has to change in order for the federation to start operating better. The MLS side of this, they're no dummies. This is something I try to tell people all the time. As much as I disagree with a lot of the things Major League Soccer does, their worldview of artificial scarcity through control power, arbitrary, sanctioning that gives them privileged status within U.S. Soccer, there are a lot of things there I disagree with. One thing you cannot say about MLS, in my opinion, is they've been smarter than everybody else in American soccer. They have figured out ways to leverage their positions, to do things to get the status that they have and do the things that they do. And so they're no dummies. These are not dumb people that are doing things. They're very, very smart. They're very, very cunning. They've been playing chess while the rest of America, when it comes to soccer, has been playing checkers. They're on another level in terms of their operations to get the things that they want. Whether we think that their cam gam spam is a chess move, it's them trying to geek out and figure out ways to find some kind of competitive balance or whatever that they do. That's their thing. And again, there's a lot of things about MLS I disagree with, but you can't say that they're not smart people. They're very smart. And so when they heard the rumblings, and that they heard them, just like if everybody else is starting to hear them, they were hearing them, then that they're going to start having some type of either contingency plan or a proactive plan. And what I'm hearing is MLS was always looking towards its own league. Where the winging it part comes in, from what I'm hearing, is the fact that U.S. Soccer pulling the plug now, and MLS looking at this going, well, there's a big gaping hole. Let's go and get more. So the winging it part is them figuring out exactly at this point now, what is it that they do? Who do they choose, back to their arbitrary decisions? Who do they choose to come into the league with themselves, their system that they start? Do they try to connect with youth organizations in the country like U.S. Club, U.S. Youth, and others? And what type of system of leagues or academy program do they form? That part, I think, is in flux. I don't think we know those answers. I don't think they know those answers. But in terms of the overall big idea of MLS having their own DA and coming out with an announcement, minutes after U.S. Soccer's announcement, should be no surprise to anyone who pays any attention to American soccer. They were going to have something in the hopper, even if even if it wasn't a well thought out plan that they could unveil, they didn't have a presentation. They didn't roll out, cue the promo video. Here it is, and here's the link to go sign up to get your team. They didn't have that, but they did have a statement ready. I think the most embarrassing thing of this whole MLS statement was the fact that they go through talking their kind of vague, ambiguous, comments about having their own academy that's going to do whatever and take the sport forward and blah, 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 and garbage. And again, I tell people, don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do. And in this case, if you look at what they did, they talked about, they're going to have this league and that. And then what they did at the very end was, oh, crap, we've got to cover ourselves. Oh, and we might do something for girls, too. Thanks. Bye. Last line of the letter. And it was like, oh, by the way, yeah, we might do that, too. Women's soccer is not a priority for them. And that statement said as much. And this is what happens when U.S. Soccer says that we're not going to be in the DA business for now. We're getting out. The federation has an obligation to serve its members. And there's a lot of debate on whether they did that well on the girls' side versus the boys' side. When it comes to MLS running a development academy, they have no obligation to do anything with the girls at all. And nor do they have an obligation to do anything, period, or for anybody that's non-MLS. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at what's going to come, this giant void. In U.S. Soccer, did something that I'm not a big fan of. If you're going to shut something down like this, you don't want to leave uncertainty. I talked about this on the show a week or so ago. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, they've created a power vacuum by absconding from the responsibility. They've created a power vacuum, and everybody knows that nobody is taking leadership, somebody's going to become the leader. And if you say, we're the United States Soccer Federation and we don't want to be in charge, somebody's going to be in charge. And we already know, and if you pay attention, MLS is going to be in charge if you're not in charge. And, over the last decade or more, MLS has become more and more in charge of everything. And that's what's happened here. And unless the federation does something, MLS put out this statement, just like you said, it's not fleshed out. It's not a full program. Now were the optics super bad that, 13 minutes after the initial statement comes out, MLS comes out with their statement? Yes. And it looks bad, and it looks like they colluded together and whatever, but I really don't think that they did here. But MLS is going to take over. But the only good thing that can happen from this is U.S. Soccer has some time to get next year's program together if they decide, oh, we made a mistake by not having something going forward. Now, they just fired 40% of the staff yesterday, and I don't know who's going to come up with a new plan. But hopefully they looked at this and they see the feedback and they see the power vacuum they've created and the scrambling, where are our teams going to play? And, every organization, because it wasn't just MLS that came out and said, oh, we're going to do this, because USYS put out a statement about their elite league and how they've got this and how they've got that. And ECNL, started accepting tons and tons of teams formerly of the DA. And now the conflicts between a bunch of the clubs on the girls' side because of what the girls' DA did to ECNL a few years ago, are starting to come to the forefront. Everybody is scrambling and everybody's putting out statements because there is no leadership being shown from the federation. Hopefully, if Will Wilson is willing to make big and bold changes, such as ending the DA because it wasn't giving the kind of return that a $7 to $10 million a year investment should give on the player development side, and firing, multiple high-level staff members and a big chunk of just the total employee base of the Federation. Hopefully, this is saying that this is a new day within the Federation, and he'll come through and say, all right, whatever staff members are left, I need a plan now. You have a week to get something together, and there'll be an announcement next week or next month for what's going to happen next year. And a lot of this talk and just statements being made and whatever, he'll notice that I've created a power vacuum. I didn't maybe think this, all the way through, but at $1 million a year, over $1 million a year, you would hope that people would think things all the way through before they have big radical action like this. But hopefully he'll see that this is how this is going to work. And he, misdiagnosed the landscape of youth soccer in this country, and we'll have another statement and we'll have a plan, and something positive will come from this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a giant power vacuum, and I think the decisions that are being made at the moment, some of them necessary. My problem is not oftentimes in situations I've seen this even with local clubs. You make a decision to go in a different direction, and that decision in isolation may be the right decision, but the new path, the new direction, what comes next has to be addressed. You don't, whenever you're leading an organization through change, just from a leadership perspective, when you are leading an organization through change, you're already creating uncertainty just by going, hey, look, we're not going this way anymore. We're going this way. What you don't want to do is compound that by not having clear vision of where you're going next, because everyone may agree, hey, this was a bad idea to get in this boat and be heading south, towards Cuba. But we don't know where we're going now. Like we're not going to Cuba, but where are we going? Right. And now the boat's going in a different direction. So the same thing with an organization. You may, as an organization, go, look, we don't need to do this anymore. This is not a good idea for us. And everyone in the room may go, you know what? You're exactly right. We got to change that. But you have to then go, okay, here's what we are doing. Here's where we are. I have no problem with Will Wilson. And I think the letter, stated it had 3 names. So we have to assume, because the letter had 3 names, that those 3 individuals, at the very least, all knew. We can't get on another conference call here with Will Wilson and Cindy Parlow-Cone and Cindy going like, I had no idea this was happening, right? Her name's on the letter. So Will Wilson, Cindy Parlow-Cone, and Ernie Stewart, all 3 names were on the letter about the termination of the DA. If you're going to come out with that letter and you say this program is over, effective immediately, okay, fine. I got no problem with that. But tell the people, here's what to expect. If you're running a company right now in the middle of this pandemic and you're going to go, hey, look, for example, I was listening to one of the guys from Lyft talking about some of the things that they were trying to work their way through with some of their Lyft drivers during the pandemic. And they said, look, we understand that the rides may not be as many as you're used to providing. And so for anybody who needs extra hours and extra work, and you're probably not going to get those right now because we're mainly transporting essential workers, etc. Then we have proactively went to Amazon and set up a special page where you can kind of get first in line to get the opportunity of picking up extra hours working at Amazon during the pandemic. And they did some other things like that, like creating a whole new service and whatever. And I'm not here to like beat the drum for Lyft. I'm using this as an example of how leaders should lead when they're forced to make tough decisions. You don't just say to your Lyft drivers, hey, sorry guys, you're screwed. We hate it, but it's over. And hopefully one day you'll come back. That's not how you lead an organization properly. If U.S. Soccer is going to go, hey, all of you families who have paid thousands of dollars to play in the DA, travel in the DA, participate in the DA, it's over. And oh, by the way, we don't have any news for you other than the fact that it's just over. That's not good leadership. There should have been, when that conversation was had about terminating the DA, here is like, there was not even a web page on U.S. Soccer's website to go here for more information on what you and your club need to do next. No, not even suggestions. So when you're going through this situation and you're looking at, how things should be handled in uncertainty, you don't want to create more uncertainty than you need to. You're already going to create angst by terminating the DA. Don't compound it by not having some guidelines or provision or vision for what the future may look like. That's my bigger issue here, not the termination of the DA, but the more uncertainty, the power vacuum that you mentioned that took place. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with more here in just a minute. And you can continue to text your questions to 1-844-789-8844. You can email your questions to team@WRKMN. And you can also send your Twitter DM questions to @Daniel Workman. DMs are open, and we are getting tons of questions coming in. So feel free to do that right now. We'll be back in just a couple minutes after a word from both of our sponsors, ducticbrand.com, where you can use promo code DW Show to get 10% off of your order, as well as Charity Water, who provides clean drinking water to people all over the world. We'll be right back with our live Q&A with Chris Kessel right after this.
Want a commercial break.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything.
Hold that closed.
Right? You could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
पहिला म पनि बच्चा अवस्थामा रहँदाखेरि मैले यो कल्पना गरेको थिइनँ कि तर अहिलेको बच्चाहरूलाई मैले सोद्धाखेरि अथवा उनीहरूलाई क्लासमा गएर तिमी के भन्ने भनेर भन्दाखेरि उनीहरू बच्चाहरूले 1 क्लास 2 क्लास 3 क्लासका बच्चाहरूले उनीहरूले सहजै रूपमा चाहिँ अभिव्यक्त गर्न सक्छन्।
म टिचर बन्छु, सोशल वर्क इन्जिनियर।
I am to be a pilot.
Obviously, I'm police bannना I want to be nurse.
Welcome back into the show. Thanks for tuning in. Had a few technical difficulties there over the break, trying to get some things sorted out here, but I think we're back up and running. And before we get back into our questions, you can continue to text, email, or send those questions, and we will put that information back on the screen here for you to see. Text questions into 1-844-789-8844. Email into team@wrk.mn, or send Twitter DM questions. DMs are open at Daniel Workman, and we are going through our live Q&A. We're back here with Chris Kessel to kind of pick up on our next series of questions, and that is the first is can you guys explain solidarity payments and training compensation and the difference between the two? Chris, you want to take a stab at it?
So training compensation is paid to the training club upon a player signing their first professional contract. And solidarity payments are paid to the training club or the clubs that had the player from the age of 23 and under upon their transfer out of the country. You know, so they're two things designed to help protect smaller clubs from having all of their best players taken, you know, for free by bigger clubs, or from, you know, they're not to protect that. I think that's the wrong word. It's not to protect. It's to reimburse them for, you know, this. And then the solidarity payments are to reward them for developing the best players, that are out there. So those are the differences, just in 20 seconds, the difference between the two types of payments.
Yeah, the easy way to think of it is your training compensation is typically domestic, and solidarity, like it's not, this isn't exact, but it's just in kind of a general, just to wrap your heads around. Solidarity payments are generally international. So, whenever you're looking at, a young player that goes from, let's say, a smaller club in England and then signs with Liverpool or Manchester City, upon signing their first pro contract, those clubs are responsible for paying in each country. They have kind of a pay scale of how this works. So this is a situation where they would have some kind of generally prearranged schedule, and then the clubs can dispute it, saying, well, no, this player is actually special and we deserve more consideration, etc. And those will go to what I think in England they call them tribunals to determine some of those things. And then your solidarity payments, as you mentioned, is some of the things that we've seen recently with some American players who have gone over to Europe to play. Those clubs are supposed to pay their clubs that develop them. It's 5% of their signing or transfer, basically signing on fee. Basically is the easiest way to think of it, and that gets based and parsed out on the number of years they were with your club, etc. And it's why. Honestly, it's why one of the issues where U.S. soccer has really messed up over the years is been in player identification / registration of players, because they've made it way more complicated than it should be. Every player should have a national player ID card, and they should be in the national U.S. soccer database with their player ID card and their player passport, which are both documents that are needed for international transfers. And it would definitely, I think, reduce some of the confusion whenever you get into these sanctioning organizations, and that's a different thing than the sanctioning. All right, so sanctioning would be, U.S. club offers you sanctioning, and that includes insurance and a player card, and that gets you access to their programming. And any programming that is marked open within the U.S. soccer ecosystem. Same thing for U.S. youth soccer, USASA, etc. That's sanctioning. But the ID card, think of it like a driver's license for a player, as well as their player passport. All of that information is a federation responsibility under FIFA. And they've not handled those duties very well. And that is why some of the solidarity payment issues have been complicated. The DeAndre Yedlins and the Clint Dempseys and others, where there weren't clean records, and that's something the federation should have had. It's the clean records. That's a different issue than sanctioning. We could get into a conversation whether the player cards that are national player ID cards should include sanctioning or not, but that's not necessarily relevant for this conversation about solidarity payments and training compensation. Second question along these, from the same person, is do you, Chris, have any advice on beard-friendly face masks?
Face mask? No, I don't have any advice on beard-friendly face masks. Just wash your beard every day. That's my advice with it.
Wash your beard every day. That's a good advice. I think during, before, and after the pandemic. But I thought you'd get a kick out of that one. Next question. What are our thoughts on trying to create a separate federation instead of reforming this one? So you want to take a stab at it, or you want me to go first?
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. If you have about $500 million that you're willing to waste, then go ahead and start trying to make a new federation, because that's what it's going to take. Because, you even heard Rishi Segal from NASL, and with Rocco Camiso money, who's willing to put up tens of millions of dollars in a antitrust lawsuit, even said that starting a new federation is, a laughable proposition. It would take 9 figures to get a new federation started. 9 figures to fight all those lawsuits, to lobby Congress. We just talked about how the USOPC doesn't, do the kind of oversight that it probably should be doing concerning the United States Soccer Federation. So, you would have to lobby Congress, and not just to have a hearing, but you would have to lobby enough people in Congress that you would be able to get something passed to make a new federation. Like, that's how I feel about it. And, I know that I probably sound just like all the people that say, it's never going to happen when we talk about systemic reform. But I'm not saying that it wouldn't be possible, but I think that somebody like me, or, any other regular person out there, I don't think that that's something that is a feasible solution unless you have somebody willing to put, like, not just big money, but like super big money behind it. But, I mean, that's just where I am with, starting a new federation.
Yeah, I generally agree with your view there. I have actually talked about before the many hurdles that you would have to overcome. Professional player contracts would be very difficult to do for players that have national team prospects. Or for our international players. Those two areas, which are, generally going to be the type of players that you would need and want to bring in to kind of kick off the league and say, hey, we're here and we're serious, and you should take us serious, are likely unavailable because of FIFA's rules banning players playing outside of the FIFA family. That right there is a big hurdle that is needed to basically prove legitimacy. Now, the money aspect is another big piece of it. You've got to have substantial operations because you've got a lot of soccer in this country that they may not be happy with U.S. soccer, but to think that you're going to start just having this cascade of movement to a new organization without some kind of financial enticements is I'm sorry, that's just not happening. They would rather deal with the mediocrity of today than go to the uncertainty and lose their or potentially lose their place in the line within U.S. soccer. So that's not going to be very likely either. The only way I think a new federation legitimately could happen would be pressure from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee as well as FIFA. So the one scenario that I have heard repeatedly be the only option for this is a scenario similar to what's happened a few years ago with Argentina. And that is if these FBI investigations, and I had Ken Benzinger on the show recently talking about this as well, in terms of, they've indicted a couple Fox officials. They're continuing these investigations, the FBI. If the FBI ever is either able to, bring charges or, find connections and makes those public or whatever. If any of that ever happened where it became, a matter of public record, not speculation, but like legitimate, like, presidents and former presidents and executives at U.S. Soccer are indicted, then I think at that point you could have a serious conversation with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and others about how do you go forward. Is the organization in its current construct salvageable? Should a new organization be created because this is systemic, et cetera, et cetera? That is the only scenario where you would have to, have U.S. Soccer in such a state of crisis, like it's on fire, it is burning to the ground, and it has completely lost the public trust. And I think the main areas where that would be a concern for U.S. Soccer standpoint of view, where there would be exposure, would be in a couple of areas. One would be, as I mentioned, all of the bribery charges those investigations that are still ongoing, the wire fraud and money laundering charges. If those connections came back to high level U.S. Soccer officials and they get roped in, I think that's a potential for a new federation, or at least a legitimate conversation could begin about forming a new organization to handle that. Another area would be in terms of the political climate obviously they've gotten a lot of blowback recently on their treatment of the U.S. women's national team. If situations like that with gender discrimination continued, or got worse to a point where judges were stepping in and issuing edicts and judgments and injunctions, etc., then I think that's another area with public pressure where people would go, okay, hey, look, they don't care what anybody says. They're going to do what they want to do. Then I think at that point, there's some political pressure. And the other area would be similar to what happened under the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee with USA Gymnastics. If you found that the federation, and this, I'm not talking about a club within the federation. I'm not talking about a coach within the federation. I'm not talking about even one of their sanctioned members, like a U.S. Youth Soccer or U.S. Club Soccer, AYSO for that matter. I'm talking about the federation itself. If it was found to have systemic child abuse, that and like a child trafficking or child abuse or whatever that's part of the culture of the federation and operations of the federation, then I think at that point that would be another potential for changes. So we'll have to see, but I don't think it's likely, and I don't think at this point it's worth the effort to do it as an external project. All of that being said, I have one giant caveat. Thinking of what you need to do to create a new federation is a healthy exercise on how to reform and how to do what you need to do to fix American soccer, and there are ways to begin to do that from within the federation. So I have spoken to people at U.S. Soccer about this issue. When the lawsuit from AYSO against the federation concerning youth soccer and USYS happened decades ago, U.S. Soccer had the choice, and U.S. Youth Soccer had the choice to basically become one organization. And had they become one organization, we would not have any other sanctioning organizations in this country. All sanctioning would have come directly from the federation, and AYSO and later U.S. Club Soccer would have basically been simply programming organizations. We organize tournaments, we organize leagues, we organize this, and our leagues and our setups are better than your leagues and your setups, and then you come play. But the actual player ID card, the actual sanctioning piece, would have been directly from the federation for every player. Now, that's what should have happened. It didn't happen. And so what we were left with was U.S. Soccer basically, using these sanctioning organizations to sanction players, allowing these sanctioning organizations to sanction players. And there's a word that's escaping me, delegate. They delegated their duties to these organizations. And so they said, hey, you have the power to sanction players. And so U.S. Youth remained a separate, 501c3 from U.S. Soccer. So AYSO was granted the same privileges. U.S. Club Soccer came along. And what a lot of people assume is that alphabet of organizations, USYS, US Club, US AYSO, SAY, USSSA, all of these are involved in the sanctioning process, as well as USASA, US Adult Soccer. New sanctioning organizations, even as recently as this past AGM, can be added to that alphabet soup. And you can create your own programming and your own sanctioning of how you want to, sanction and do soccer. So this idea of creating a new federation would be a great mental exercise, but I think the way to proceed and get more traction would be to actually pay the $10,000 and get the clubs from these different states that align with your vision to coalesce, come together under this new sanctioning organization, and you run your own programming and you go that way. And I think, so the idea of thinking through these things are good. I don't necessarily think that at the current moment that it's a good idea to realistically go and say, hey, this federation's terrible. Let's start a new one, and we come from the outside. I do think you could think of it as a new one from within, but I don't think it's realistic to try to do it from the outside. But the big key here, if you want change, you have to do it and model it. You can't just talk about it. You have to do it. You have to model it. You have to find others who are like-minded and do it. Just like you guys at West Virginia said, we don't like the voting policy, so you did something about it. You sent in a policy revision. You sent in multiple policy revisions. Ultimately, they rejected them, but you tried to do something about it, and I know you guys are going to do it again and come back with an updated version to hopefully get this thing through. That's how you get change. It's not just to get up and talk about it. It's to actually do things about it. Our next question is, what are your thoughts on the relationship and the coexistence, connections, whatever, between the new CEO, Will Wilson, Cindy Parlow-Cone, and Stephen Malik, all three with North Carolina FC connections, either through the academy or the pro team, but basically all kind of connected in that way. What are your thoughts on this triad of a relationship?
You want to take that one? Look good. Yeah, it doesn't look good. And that's something that just over and over and over and over again, just things don't look good. I know that all the time, people like myself and yourself, we get accused of being conspiracy theorists. Oh, it's a conspiracy. Everything's a conspiracy. Look, it doesn't look good. I mean, it's just that simple. Like when three of the most powerful people within soccer in this country, within a month, 2 months, all take over positions within U.S. Soccer as president, CEO, and a board member, and on the professional council, all come from the same club and are all tied together. That doesn't look good. I mean, there's no other way to say it than that doesn't look good.
I agree.
I've never actually talked to two of them, so
the optics were not good, and they continue to be puzzling at best, especially when you start to talk about the timeline of how we got to today, right? So Alec Papadakis is on the board at the AGM. Right after the board, he's removed from the Pro Council and replaced by Stephen Malik, who comes back on the board weeks later. Carlos Cordero is forced out as president of U.S. Soccer, replaced by Cindy Parlow-Cone. And like a week later, there's an announcement of Will Wilson as CEO. And we're off to the races. So, I think, looking at the optics, it's definitely concerning. And, it's why organizations, we talked about uncertainty before, in terms of, when you make a decision, make sure you got your follow-up or your next steps in place so you can lead people through change in a good way. It's why organizations need guardrails. They need bylaws and policies and conflicts of interest policies that have teeth to ensure that, okay, look, Will Wilson may have been the best candidate for the job. Nobody can say that he wasn't with certainty. What we can say is that if he is the best candidate for the job, then make sure that if the optics aren't great, that there is some level of trust in the organization from a bylaw and policy standpoint, conflicts of interest standpoint, and others, that you're bringing in the guy who you think is going to do a good job, and regardless of pre-existing relationships, is not going to be able to just do whatever he wants for the people that he prefers. And so you have that, back to the accountability oversight, that gets built into the DNA of the culture of an organization. So in this regard, that's why the optics to me are doubly bad, because U.S. Soccer doesn't have a strong conflicts of interest policy. When it comes to financial decisions, when it comes to this decision, when you have a decision where the stakeholders are not even part of the conversation, and yet you and I both sat and listened to the board of directors complain about Illinois adult soccer's proposal to publish the professional league standards in the bylaws and policies. And one of their big complaints, Sunil Gulati brought this up in the board meeting, and others echoed this, was that the professional leagues didn't have any input on the proposal. Like, they needed to be consulted to send in a policy that affected them. You just canceled the DA for thousands of kids over the country. Mm-hmm. You just canceled it. And you never talked to their clubs.
The youth committee had no idea. You didn't talk to the youth committee? Yeah, I mean, that's, and they published that. The thing that's, if there was a long track record that the Federation, goes out of their way to make sure that they do the right thing and they look out for all of its members and everything, the optics on a lot of these decisions wouldn't be as worrisome. It's just that there is a long history that they don't do the right thing. They don't look out for everybody. And it's easy to see that this happens, that these optics are super worrisome, because when you look at this pattern, you say, okay, well, the last time something like this happened, something bad happened. So something happens. Now, is there going to be another foot that drops now? And to poo-poo people's idea that they shouldn't, that they're worried about this, and you shouldn't be worried about that. Like, why would they do something? Like, look, man, you're not really paying attention to how all of everything works, or you're a beneficiary of how things work, and you know, that's one of the other things that you have to worry about, is who is saying that you shouldn't worry about that. And hopefully, like, look, optimism hope springs eternal. And I hope that Will Wilson does an awesome job. Like, and I think that that's something that people don't really understand about people that want to see change is I don't want to complain about this stuff. I want it to work right. You want it to work right. Everybody that's out here complaining wants it to work right. And hopefully Will Wilson coming in and looking at it and saying the DA's broke, we're getting rid of that. We don't need all these staff members. XYZ's not doing right. So I'm going to fire a bunch of people. The glass door, we're getting rid of HR. The glass door review. So I'm firing the HR person. Hopefully he's came in and has a good understanding during the interview process and his research and everything of these are a bunch of things that are broken, and I'm going to get rid of that. And, but this is the big but, we have no history that says this kind of stuff's going to happen within a federation. So these are the two things that the two pathways. Are we going to continue down this pathway of, insiders looking out for insiders, or did we actually get somebody who is going to say, no, we're going to run this the way that it's supposed to be ran and go that way? I mean, I don't blame people for looking at these optics and saying, man, this is just more of the same. I don't blame them for that. I hope they're wrong. I hope every single one of the people that say that are wrong. I truly, really do.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. The right thing to have done in this whole DA termination is to have gotten on a conference call with all of the DA clubs and said, hey guys, this is where we're at. This is the issue that we're facing. And, may not change the decision that U.S. Soccer ultimately made, but having people just hang in the wind for days without any feedback and any official involvement in the process, that's a problem. And I hope that Will Wilson and Cindy Parlow-Cone learn from this so that in the future, they are more inclusive during the process, as well as dealing with the aftermath after the process. Next question is for both of us. They said, first time caller, I'll hang up and listen. This is their question. What has more power? What has more power in American soccer? A, the U.S. Soccer Federation president, B, the U.S. Soccer Federation CEO, or 3, Chris's beard?
Unfortunately, you didn't tell me until last night that this was going to be a video chat. So, I'm looking super scruffy today. So my power level is way down. It's way down,
Yeah.
But so beard is off the table. It's a great question. Me and you have had this. I don't know if we've ever talked about this on one of our, public conversations, but we've definitely had this chat before about the power of the president of U.S. Soccer. They're just one vote on the board. You know, they don't have the ability to unilaterally do a lot. I mean, I'm the president of a couple boards and, sit on a couple other boards. And, the president sort of just runs the board meetings and has a vote and has the ability, to set the tone and the direction of an organization, but they can't force through things. It's still a political process at the board level, and they are just one vote. Now, the CEO is who, implements the day-to-day actions that the board says this is what we want to happen. So they quite often have a lot of leeway on how things are implemented, because if I just give you, hey, go cancel the DA, it's up to you to figure out how to cancel it, and are we going to communicate? Are we not going to communicate? They have a lot of leeway. So within U.S. Soccer, the CEO position, I think, is people undersell how powerful that position is, and they oversell how powerful the position of president of U.S. Soccer is. You have a lot more pressure on you, I think, as president of U.S. Soccer, because you're the face of the organization. But that's a great question, and I actually don't know what the answer would be.
So technically, in an org chart, the president hires and fires the CEO. The CEO can't hire and fire the president. So from a technical standpoint, the president is basically higher up the food chain, right? They technically have more power because they are the person that, along with the other board members, that the CEO is accountable to. What I do think was skewed of recent years was the way that Sunil Gulati operated as president. He was very much the public face of U.S. Soccer. Dan Flynn did not mind being, behind the scenes, running day to day, and Sunil enjoyed the public, spectacle of being president. He enjoyed, being very hands-on as president. Some would call him a micromanager, very much involved. I think it's why a lot of people in the 2018 election kept asking the question, should the presidential position be a paid position? Because they were looking at it from the way that Sunil Gulati operated. He was very much hands-on, very much involved in a lot of the day-to-day. And so, a lot, I think, depends on how you approach it. But at the same time, from the technical standpoint, the president is more powerful than the CEO. But I to your point, to diminish the power of the day-to-day operations role, a decision-making role, I think we've seen how much power a CEO can command in an organization in what has happened in the last few days. Will Wilson is the one who stepped in and goes, boom, done on the DA. And yes, he had to have the support of others within the organization. But doing something is better than not doing anything when there are a lot of things that need to get fixed. And sometimes could it make it worse? Yes. But, he took action, and that's what you would hope that a CEO would try to do, even if it's the wrong action. I would rather them try something than being paralyzed with indecision. So both are powerful roles. Both have the ability to affect change. And at the end of the day, the way the organizational depth chart, flow chart is constructed within U.S. Soccer. Technically, the president can hire and fire the CEO and not the other way around. So I think that's the technical answer. But I think to your point, both have a lot of influence in the direction of American soccer. Next question. What should U.S. Soccer do to identify talented youth and develop them, especially in rural areas or low-income areas?
Well, obviously, coming from a rural area and, working with a lot of low income kids, I've put a lot of thought to this. And, I've come to a conclusion over the last couple years, and the way that things are structured now, it doesn't really matter. Like, if I have 5 kids who are awesome and they're like 13 years old, like, let's say, I have a golden generation of local players here, and they're the best players that have ever came from here, and they're youth national team level players and whatever. Without the money that would be necessary to support them on the day-to-day club soccer level, it doesn't matter if they get identified. Like, they're screwed no matter what. If we find some youth national team level player in Idaho, I mean, unless somebody is going to move them to a city with one of these, elite academies, or move them to an MLS city so they can play in their academy and have it be free and cover their travel and everything, there's nothing that can happen. That's because of the structural built-in inequality of how youth soccer works in this country. If we spent $20 million a year on better scouting and found all the best 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds in the country, okay, we found them. I mean, like, there's nowhere for them to go. They're locked out of the system. Whether or not we scout and find these kids, it doesn't matter, unless, we structurally change how they're able to access the system after that.
Right. So a couple key points that you brought up that I agree with, and I want to build on. First is the structural changes go into identification, scouting, as well as you pointed out, development. Before ID, during ID, after ID has occurred of a player, and I want to kind of bring in a comment from John Johnson on Twitter, who said, can we not get to a system in youth soccer where kids stay and play local, and then our so-called elite players are selected to play on regional or state teams from time to time, instead of forcing kids from their club to an elite team with all the costs and travel, which is kind of back to the structural issue. I think our friend John Townsend, has a really good point on this, and that is when we look at structure and changing the structure to support better ID of players. I think the idea of having regional training centers in regional, I think in the case of the United States, should be viewed as a minimum of 55 regional training centers, one in each state association boundary, would be a good start in terms of having regular programming. Spain does this, and they build it into their calendar, where clubs know on this day of the week or this day of the month that no programming takes place, because the regional training centers are in action, and they're bringing in the best players into those events or training opportunities. So I think structurally, if we want to get serious about the ID part of the equation for any kid, regardless of their socioeconomic status or geography of where they live, the first piece is to address the ID thing is an idea similar to what John's talking about is putting out these, regional training centers. And in my view, regional needs to be thought of at the youth level as a state boundary for the state associations. There's 55 of those state boundaries because California, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York each have 2 state associations to cover the amount of registered players. So you have California, Texas, Ohio are all north-south divisions, and in Pennsylvania and New York are east-west divisions. And so in those scenarios, having those ID centers on a state association boundary level, that brings in kids regardless of your affiliation. You could be, playing in an unsanctioned league. You could be playing in USYS. You could be playing in US Club. It should not matter. This should be a federation operation that's going out trying to bring in the best kids that they can see and scout into these 55 regional training centers and keeping tabs on the players. So the ID part, that's one area where I think structurally there should be a move to that format and programming. The development piece structurally is an issue that is far beyond where we are at the moment. And that is supporting the ID of players and the development of that ID'd player. We have gotten crazy in what we have allowed to take place in the youth soccer space. And there was a thread yesterday that I retweeted, and I'll try to mention again, but it went through kind of where we are today and how we got here, and talking about how these local organizations kind of developed their select teams, and then that kind of morphed into these elite teams, and then these elite teams became elite clubs, and then these elite clubs said, in order to be elite, we got to travel farther. That gives us the prestige that we're elite because we don't play anybody local. We go 5 hours to play somebody else because that makes us feel better about ourselves. So you have this mentality that's going on. So structurally, that piece has to change in order to make it more accessible. You cannot be asking families to spend the kind of money to do it. So I think that is, to me, where we got to look at for that. Next question, and we're going to kind of try to wrap it up with a few of these kind of rapid fire questions, Chris. So we're going to go through a series of these as quickly as we can as we wrap up today's show. When was the last reported audit from U.S. Soccer? Do you know when that occurred?
The last audit of the financials, was presented right after the AGM.
Yeah, it usually happens on an annual basis. It's not necessarily a forensic accountant from outside. This is an internal audit, organizational audit. And I know that they do get, I think, some outside. They
hire an external auditor. I mean, they have an internal auditing process from the VP, but the actual audit that's submitted is from an external firm.
Right. Okay. What I meant to say is that the forensic accounting audit is kind of that's a whole nother enchilada level. That does not happen regularly with U.S. Soccer. It's more of a standard formal oversight audit of the federation. So sorry, I misspoke on that one. Next question. What are the odds that U.S. Youth Soccer and the ECNL at least try to find common ground and come together and form regional coalitions? Are there really that many leaders who are against that? The odds are really, really low, like negative 50. And the leaders Are there many leaders who are against them? Pretty much every leader in their fiefdom is against ceding control of their fiefdom to someone else. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, U.S. youth soccer already has regional leagues along with a national league, and the U.S. club soccer exists, to compete against those. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of competing, thing. Paul Kennedy put out a great stat yesterday. He researched it, and he found that there were over 200 boys U17 teams playing in national leagues. So that's obviously enough for 10, 12 regional leagues right there. And if you add in just a few of the best regional playing leagues, you have 10 or 12 great regional leagues all across the country, no national travel. But that would take a bunch of people working together and being kid-centric as opposed to adult ownership centric of the organizations, whether they're profit, for profit or nonprofit, it doesn't really matter. But there a lot of things could happen to change if there was just leadership from the federation, because the federation could step in right there and fix that problem in a heartbeat, but they're just choosing not to.
So I agree, and I think that the real issue in terms of that is that this has been allowed for so long. I don't see number one, U.S. Soccer stepping in and forcing these changes, and number two, I don't see those who have the incentive against cooperation, i.e., we're running our own programming. That would be a big ask for them to say, we're going to stop what we're doing from a programming standpoint to do this collaboratively. I just don't see that happening. And I, as much as I think the federation should organize one giant system of connected leagues, I don't think U.S. youth soccer, U.S. club soccer, AYSO, USSSA, and every other alphabet soup organization is going to do that themselves. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect them to do it or ask them to do it, because that's not been their track record, and that's not been what they have been about. Look, I think we've covered a lot today, and talked about a lot in terms of youth development, ID, where we're at in terms of the organization, and Will Wilson and the relationships that he had pre-existing before he came in, and all of that. I just want to say at the close of this, I feel confident speaking for both of us when I say that what we want to see is the good of the game held as the top priority, to make soccer accessible to everyone, regardless of your socioeconomic status, and the best way to do that that I have ever seen is to make it sporting merit based and not financially merit based. And so, whenever we look at the federation and we talk about what needs to happen or what needs to change, or what should the next steps be, it's always from a position of trying to improve the game, not necessarily personal vendettas or agendas of, like, I hate this person or whatever. It's not that at all. I just want to see the good of the game be the priority that and the priority motivation for you, the reason why you get up in the morning when you're in a leadership position, that's where I would hope you're coming from. And, I've said it many times. I think soccer's mission of making soccer the preeminent sport in America doesn't go far enough. We should set as our mission to become the greatest soccer country on earth. And how do we get there? How do we envision that? What can we do to make that happen? I think a connected system of leagues is a necessary piece of this. I also think this idea that we referenced a few minutes ago about trying to, at the youth level, reduce the burden of travel and expenses on families should become a priority. And I know a lot of people in the youth soccer complex don't want that to happen. They don't want to hear that. They don't want the ecosystem to change because they make, some of them, a lot of money every year based on the current landscape. But the facts are, if we're serious about the development of our players and the development of our country, there will be opportunities for you to make money like you're making now. But it needs to come differently than the way you make it right now. You should not be getting, if you're in Chicago, you should not be driving to Michigan to play teams. You're in freaking Chicago. You should rarely ever have to leave, the Chicagoland area to play competitive matches. There are millions of people there, and around the country. For most people, not everybody. I can't help it if you live in Montana or Wyoming and other countries that are more out west where you have kind of some hot density population zones in a city, in a state, but then you got to drive more than a couple hours to get to the next kind of hot zone. Okay. I can't do anything about that. But for much of the country where our population density does allow, you should not be driving more than 2 to 3 hours for a match. On a weekend, there should not be stay and play to play high level soccer at a youth level. Barcelona players are playing locally. They're not flying all over Spain and they're not flying all over Europe on a regular basis. Do they do it on occasion? Yes. And that's why I try to teach this principle to my kids. And I think it's a principle we should adopt when we look at structure, system, policies, et cetera, for U.S. soccer. When the exception becomes the rule, that's when we have a problem. It's okay to have a national championship series or a rare, travel situation where a team is fundraising to go to the, Little League World Series. They're fundraising to go to this event. Okay. I got no problem chipping in and giving a kid some money because this is maybe his one shot to go to, a national event. Okay, fine. And I think communities would get behind that because they would look at it the same way. But what's happened in American youth soccer is that exception has now become the rule. And we've priced out way too many families. We've made it way too expensive. And what are we getting for it? What is your player getting for all the money they're paying? What are you getting? You're not getting world-class development because that we can see that's not happening. We're not exporting and producing, amazing world-class players at the international level. So we're not paying for that. So, when you look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, I think a giant rethink that goes with a priority of local. Let's reduce travel as much as possible. Let's make it merit-based. Let's make it accessible. That needs to be the priority going forward. And whether that's a U.S. club, U.S. youth, or somebody else that says, hey, we're going to pick this up and make this our mantle, or some new organization comes along that says, we want to try to do soccer the right way and connect clubs together with the same goals and ambition, then fine. But that needs to be the path forward for youth soccer, not more of this get on an airplane at 14 years old to play one match kind of thing. That should be the exception, not the expectation to play at a, quote, elite level. If Barcelona is not getting on a plane to fly all over Spain, and that country is a fraction of the size of the United States, then we shouldn't be asking our kids to do the same thing. And I'm pretty sure Barcelona is doing a decent job at producing players compared to the U.S. So, Chris, do you have any last thoughts as we wrap up today's live Q&A?
No, you closed us out pretty good right there. I'm in agreement. A lot of people just look at the cost of club soccer and they just look at it as, say, oh, well, it's, $2,000 a year to play. People should be able to save and afford that. That's discounting the $10,000 that people have to spend to travel every weekend and stay in hotels for 2 or 3 days, and expensive hotels that they've overpriced because it's a stay and play, and the required, just all these costs that people don't really think about and how it locks people out. And local soccer is what we need to be striving for, raising the floor, okay? Raising the lowest level that players, play at. If we raise the floor, then the kids that are up high have to raise their game also, and more local play options, and we'll end up with better players. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, the more players we have playing at a higher level, and when I say more players playing at the higher level, I mean even the kids who are, only playing for fun, which I hate that because, that's not what's happening. They're playing to win, and they're playing with their friends, and they want to beat their friends, back to the conversation we had earlier. But if we can get those kids playing at a higher level, it helps every single person in this country that is worried about youth development, and it gets them playing longer and more often, and they have more enjoyment out of the game. And, and that's what all this is about. If we are literally trying to be this best soccer nation in the world, we need to have as many people enjoying the game for as long as possible. And that's all of the millions of kids in this country, and not just this 0.006% that compete at the DA level. Thanks for having me on this morning, Daniel. We talked about this yesterday. We wondered if we were going to go for a little over an hour, and here we are 2 hours and 10 minutes later.
And I think with
listening in.
Yeah, look, I think we could keep going, but we're going to wrap that up for today because I'm sure there's a lot more we can do on a future live Q&A show. But I appreciate your time, Chris. Keep up the great work. Look, the path to getting where we need to go as a country is going to require people to come together who are like-minded. Not everyone's going to be on the same page. We know that. But those who are, we should be trying to find common ground and forge a path forward together. And hopefully that in this time of uncertainty, with the elimination of the DA and everything else swirling around, hopefully this is a time where some like-minded folks can find some common ground and build a better way. So, Chris, thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe. And for everybody watching who sent in questions, thank you for your comments, your feedback, and your questions. And we look forward to continuing to address these topics on future shows. Appreciate it. Hope everyone out there is staying safe as well. Have a great weekend. We'll see everybody on Monday.